Hello, my name is Jeff Richard, and I'd like to welcome you to what is now the second edition of Portsmouth This Week. It's a weekly discussion with our Portsmouth Town Administrator, John Clem, and other Portsmouth officials. The video series will air on local public access TV channel 18 and also be available for viewing anytime on the internet through links from the Portsmouth Town website and other selected sites, perhaps YouTube. The purpose of this series is to provide the citizens of Portsmouth with a better understanding of what their local government is doing, why it is doing it, and what we, the citizens, can do to interface in that process. This program is produced by all local volunteers under the auspices of the Town Administrator, John Clem, who will be our guest today. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Jeff.
You have sent to the Town Council a series of budget statements and a budget policy statement. And our previous program, you explained lots of the features that were associated with that document. The one that we didn't get a chance to talk about, which I'd like to talk about now, was you recommended a community outreach and a long-range community planning. Could you explain just a little bit about how you envision, and perhaps a description of what you did in Barnstable while you were there as Town Administrator for so many years, how you managed and how we'd like to manage our civic engagement here in town?
Well, I included the whole package of community outreach and civic engagement tools because the bottom line is that we're here to serve the residents and taxpayers of Portsmouth. And we should never, I believe, get to a point where we know better than our citizens do about what we should be doing and not doing and how we should be doing it. And so to do that, you have to have an open line of communications. And so for years, that would mean that the town council or the governing body would hold meetings, and a good number of citizens would come out and attend on a regular basis, long before there was TV. And then, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, people's lives got more complicated, and now you're into the 90s and in the last decade or two, and people's lives have fundamentally changed. No longer does a good number of our citizens have the luxury of having the time to not only attend local meetings but participate in those meetings or whatever. And so for the last decade or so, local governments from all across the country have tried to answer the question, what are we doing wrong and how do we get people back into the fold, so to speak, in terms of their participation in government. The mistake that many local governments have made is that they haven't realized that times have changed, and the old way of doing business just doesn't work anymore. And so it has become increasingly clear that if we want to have an ongoing relationship with our taxpayers and citizens, that we need to use the technological tools that are available and that our citizens use on a regular basis to communicate with them. And so what does that mean? It means our town website, it means our television station, and it means a whole variety of technologies that need to be used so that we can reach out to our citizens. It's just not enough for us to sit in town hall and think that we're doing a good job. Because if we think we're doing a good job but our citizens don't, then we're not. Because they're the bosses, it is their taxpayers, tax dollars that we're spending. And so the system won't work if there isn't a way to communicate on a regular basis. And so part of that is putting together a plan that uses every means available to have outreach. We do have a basic website. Of course, there's a long way to go in that regard for it to be totally effective. But I do have some ideas, and part of my recommendations in the budget is to put together a committee of citizens that both have a high level of expertise in the area of communications, but also an interest, so that we can put together a long-range communications strategy. Part of that is the fact that we have the access to television, and that is incredibly underutilized. Yes, we have the town council and school committee members being taped or whatever, but we have the capacity to communicate with our citizens much more than we're doing now. You know, we wonder at times why people aren't on board with something that we're doing, and we don't realize that we haven't even given them the courtesy of an explanation as to why we're doing a certain thing. And so I think that programs like this could help us in that regard. There has been concerns, because we're a coastal community, for example, that we don't have, even though technology is available, we don't have the ability to reach out to our citizens in a timely fashion in a case of an emergency. That might be a hurricane or some other natural disaster, but it might also just, it might be, a lost child or a disoriented senior that has been lost.
So you'd be in favor of Code Red program?
Well, that is one brand name, but I'm absolutely in favor. As a matter of fact, I put in funding into the budget for a communications device that allows us in the matter of minutes to contact our citizens. It might be a town-wide issue, or it might just be a neighborhood. There might be a gas leak or some other problem in a neighborhood that we need to immediately contact our citizens. And so I have included funding for that.
We in the Portsmouth Water and Fire Board have installed a Code
Yes.
Red system, and don't have a universal acceptance of entry into it yet, but that's okay. You mentioned that in the town charter, which is being revised as we speak, I guess, there's no mention of a civic engagement committee or any of those things. Could you do what you want to do outside of the charter, or do you think the charter folks ought to put a two-sentence line that says that the town administrator shall have a
Well, certainly
for transparency?
There's enough flexibility for the town administrator or the town council to form ad hoc committees from time to time. But I think that you bring up an excellent point, and that is the issue of communications and civic engagement is so important. Mm-hmm. I would hope that our charter committee would at least look at that to try to institutionalize this whole area of concern, because I think it's the future of local government. I mean, we're either going to die on the vine, or we're going to change the way we conduct our business, because if we continue to lose the confidence of our residents and taxpayers, they're going to no longer want to continue funding our operations. And so that level of open communication and transparency is vitally important. And so something as simple as a citizens survey. Portsmouth is still a relatively small town, but no one person, I think, in town knows what the majority or the vast majority of citizens are thinking in any one given point. But we have been seeing surveys being done nationally for years that are incredibly accurate in terms of the results. And so I will be arguing before the town council that we should have an annual appropriation in the budget under the thinking that if we're going to ask our taxpayers to come up with $60 million to pay for a budget, that at least we could do is ask them how they would like to see us spend it, what they like and what they dislike, what they would like to see reformed or changed or whatever. So I see that the citizen survey as an important communications tool as well.
This PEG studio that we're broadcasting from, or taping in, is in a rented building at this point, because our state of Rhode Island is managing its public access television in a governmental manner. Just very briefly, what was the difference in Barnstable when?
Well, in Massachusetts, the relationship between the cable company and the community was very different. As a matter of fact, it wasn't regulated by the state, it was regulated by the local community. And so in our instance, it happened to be Comcast. Comcast would have to come to the community and get a license to have the privilege of stringing their lines and providing their services to our citizens. And so the relationship was not between the cable company and the state, it was between the cable company and the local community. And we have always valued public access and valued the importance of television as a communications tool. And so we, from the very beginning, going back into the 70s, we mandated that a certain amount of money every year and a certain commitment on the part of the cable company exist so that we could have programming like this. So it's a very different arrangement where for example, in the town of Portsmouth, we were receiving about $500,000 a year. We had a studio right in Town Hall. We had live program. We had an hour and a half of live programming a day to try to get our message out. Now, Portsmouth was a lot larger town than Portsmouth, and I don't ever think that we'll get to the point, fortunately or unfortunately, that we'll be doing that. But it is an important aspect, and we need to try to utilize every tool that we can to communicate
So
with
to keep this ball rolling, these first two segments of Portsmouth This Week were being done by 4 volunteers, but I think maybe if the word is passed out that we can accept all the volunteer help to start this kind of process up so that we can eventually end up with a committee of volunteers dealing with communication. This would be one of the subcommittees, I suppose. So
we're really limited to the commitment, which is extraordinary, but the commitment of a few of our volunteers, and we do need more volunteers, because the more talented volunteers we can enlist, the more programming that we can undertake.
How would you like those who are watching this program to be in touch with someone to get on that volunteer list?
Well, if they could certainly either stop by or contact me at Town Hall, and we certainly are in need of additional assistance, and anyone that would want to volunteer, just let us know.
Good. You mentioned something about the other committees that are not presently being filmed, the zoning board, for instance, and many other very significant committees and commissions in the town. Is there any option presently being explored to get a camera into those meetings?
Well, we are talking presently. Part of the capital plan has funds to look at Town Hall in the meeting rooms and our ability to tape meetings. But it's really a function of the number of volunteers that we have. Certainly, every committee in town, our goal should be that every committee is meeting in open with a camera, at least taping the meeting. You really can't have open government if most of your committees are being done, are taking on activities that
Very valid point.
that are done in I mean, they're open sessions, but the general public really doesn't have access because they don't have the luxury of the time to go to all of these meetings or whatever. And so in Barnstable, we not only undertook a policy that said that all committees will be aired. We had a program every night, Barnstable Today, that was a summary of what the committees did. And so because we first heard that not enough of the committees were on the air. And so we instituted a policy to get all of them on the air. Then we heard from a lot of residents, you know, I don't have 2 or 3 hours to watch the planning board. And so then we instituted a 10-minute news program every evening that explained what the planning board did, what conservation did, and whatever. So it's a summary program. It's like, as well as putting on the website all of the video on demand. For those that did want to watch the committee at a later date.
Sounds like it'd be a very ambitious goal, but a worthy one to try to do some of that in Portsmouth. I noticed in the Barnstable world that you also put out an annual report, a written report, and I don't know how 180 pages worth of information, and each town department had, in each significant committee, had to, in writing, make a statement as to what they had achieved or done or lack of achievement, whatever it was. But there was an accountability and a transparency there that was significant enough, so I think that the folks in the real estate business could take something like that, and somebody who's interested in coming into a community, they could be mailed one of these annual reports and say, this is Portsmouth, in color, right? And here are the people you can talk to, and here's what life is all about. We don't have one of those here in Portsmouth. Is that something you would consider?
Well, I'd like to
for?
say that that is uniquely Barnstable, but actually in Massachusetts there is a state law that says communities must produce a annual report. So it's a state law, it's a requirement in Massachusetts that every single city and town produce an annual report.
I'm amazed that Rhode Island doesn't have that law. That's one we must have missed.
But it is a good tool.
It is, yes.
You know, it's something, it takes a lot of work, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I know that there's some interest, and you know, it goes back to, I think that when you talk to our department heads and our staff, they're proud of the jobs that they're doing. And we find more often than not they're not at all reluctant to summarize on 2 or 3 pages what they've accomplished, what the goals were, what they accomplished, what their goals for the next year might be. And I think that really would be helpful for our citizens.
Is that something that you might, you haven't talked to your department heads yet about that, but is that something that you would think is a priority for you,
Yes.
This initial?
I think along the lines of an overall communication package, that is another tool, an annual report that not only is for, you know, folks that are contemplating moving here, but it also has some really helpful information for our citizens. They want to know what we're doing, and they want to know what we've accomplished. And we have a responsibility to tell them that. And so I will be working to get Portsmouth's first annual report published.
Good. You, in your discussion about the proposals to the town council about the budget, you, and I think very correctly so, have established a draft policy statement, a budget policy statement about how things should be. And I know that in Barnstable you had a financial plan for out years. You had a long-range capital improvement plan. Those financial plans, capital improvement plans, we don't see in Portsmouth. At least we have not as yet. The other piece of it was the financial procedures that you used in the budget creation process in Barnstable. I'd like to very quickly read something from that Barnstable charter and let you comment on it. It said, Section 6, it says, the President of the Town Council shall call a joint meeting of the Town Council and School Committee prior to the commencement of the budget process to review the financial condition of the town, revenue and expenditure forecasts, and other relevant information in order to develop a coordinated budget. Now, on the surface of that, that looks like a good process to carry forth. Did you find it workable, or is it pipe dream?
No, we found it very workable, and it was really at the core of what we were able to accomplish in terms of the interrelationship between the town and the school department, because we had started off with this annual fight for limited resources, mistrust, lack of communication, and we used the provision in the charter to begin a process that actually brought us from very little communication, very little trust, to the point where in Barnstable today there is a comprehensive consolidated administrative function where there's one director of finance for the town, not for the schools and not for the town. There's one human resource director or whatever, and so we've consolidated those functions. The significance of that meeting that is called is to allow for a more long-range approach to the problems, the challenges that we face. For example, this year in Portsmouth, I just received a request from the school department for about $1 million of new spending for the next fiscal year. The truth is that if you look at the entirety of the financial challenge that we face, that money's not there. And that's why I've said in my budget message that we're trying to be all things to all people, and we're living way beyond our means. If you start saying we've got to implement a capital plan for our infrastructure, we've got to restore our fund balance, we've got to start more seriously addressing our pension liability issues, The fact is that we don't have $1 million of new spending every year for either the school department or town departments.
You mean revenue?
Revenue, I'm sorry, for both sides of the equation. And so the point is that what we did in Barnstable is that we had kind of this discussion that carried on every year about the reality that the money's just not there anymore. There's no bad guys and good guys. The school department is doing the best they can with the resources or whatever, but what we were able to achieve in Barnstable that is not happening here is a public recognition that the resources that are available do not match the programming and the services that we're trying to provide. And so part of my budget message to the council is that there be a joint meeting between the council and the school department to talk about that issue. Not next year, not about just next year, but about the next 5 years. Another thing that we don't have a 5-year or 10-year financial projection. So we can't even see what fiscal year 14, 15, 16, and 17
Is that something
look like.
you would like to achieve?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, yes, it's part of the budget policy draft that I put before the council. Because once you have that, you come to understand that the funding that would be necessary for us to continue business the way we have become used to it, you know, $1 million of extra money every year going to the schools, hundreds of thousands of extra money going to the town operations. Those days are over. I mean, there's been a shell game going on, and we need to have an honest discussion within ourselves and with the citizens of this town that our approach needs to change. That we need a new way of doing business, and we need to look the residents and taxpayers of this town in the eye and say, you know, we cannot be all things to all people. This is what we can afford, and these other things that we've been doing, maybe we can't afford anymore. But we need to have an honest discussion about the status of the financial stability or lack thereof of this town, and we need to have that conversation soon.
Your first budget as proposed is you've come into it fairly late in the game.
Yes.
So there are many things that you could not influence, and I'm sure that you've reviewed them. So you get a buy on this one. Next year, but the next budget that you create will be all John's, I guess.
Yes.
That's the way to look at it. And the fact that so much of our budget is controlled by public employee union contracting. And the transparency of that process, the fact that so much of this negotiating is done behind closed doors. Can you just talk briefly about how in Barnstable you were able to manage the long-range forecasting and still keep excellent employees on the payroll?
I think the first mistake that many communities make is by excluding our dedicated employees from this discussion. And that needs to change. Because in reality, at the end of the day, if we're going to be asking employees to give up benefits or to change practices and policies, then we need to include them in the whole process. If we are indeed in if we are in a crisis situation or headed to that, we need to be able to articulate that not only to our citizens, but to our employees. And what we need to do to be successful in Portsmouth is to have a relationship with our employees that they are as understanding as anyone about what the problem is, and they need to be asked to be part of the solution. But that doesn't happen by demonizing them or making them the bad guys, because they aren't. Decisions have been made by this town, or not made, that are outside of the sphere of influence of the vast majority of employees or whatever. And so our number one challenge needs to be to undertake an honest and open conversation, not only with our citizens but with our employees, with the goal of saying, you know, there's no bad guys or good guys here. We need to join hands. We've got a problem. We've got a real problem, and we need to solve it.
I agree with that. The Barnstable Charter also had a section of it that had to do with your presentation of information to the decision makers. And have you noticed this? We've just got a few more minutes here. Is it the difference between the way you have understood we have conducted the budget process here, as opposed to what you're used to? Next go round, what do you see happening differently besides perhaps the annual budget policy meeting?
I've drawn many a conclusion in my short tenure here, many regarding the practices, the budgetary practices, and the policies that either exist or don't exist. I think Portsmouth is a town that has reached a point where there is a desperate need for professional management and a different way of conducting the town operations. We're not a small town anymore. I mean, it's getting to be a pretty big operation, and policies and procedures and practices that are really commonplace in many other communities haven't been adopted yet. And so everything from the way in which the budget appears or looks to the practice of passing or approving a budget needs to be addressed. And so we've got a lot of work here in Portsmouth.
Well, very good. We're coming to the conclusion of our meeting today, and the hope is that we will continue conducting just exactly this type of show here at the PEG Studio for the foreseeable future, while you get something else organized, something a little broader perhaps that talks as your civic engagement and long-range community planning thoughts would entail. But that's all the time we have today, folks. I want to thank John very much for the candid responses.
Thanks.
And obviously very comfortable here. At some point we might even have a call-in. Who knows? Anything is possible. Anyway, there's lots and lots of issues here in Portsmouth, and it's just fun to be here. This is a great town. Lots going on. And there's going to be lots of things that you're going to do to make it a better place for all of us. And I thank you for taking the job. And we want to thank everyone for watching today.
Child and Family Services has been caring for the community since 1866. Our new Community Center on John Clark Road in Middletown offers help and support to families from Newport County and beyond. Programs include Sandpiper's Early Learning Center for infants to preschool ages children, counseling services, support programs for teens, elder care services, and more. Child and Family is where people turn for help with personal and family emergencies and crises. To learn more, visit childandfamilyri.com or call this number.
In 2012, Rhode Island's new voter ID law will go into effect. You're going to need to bring with you identification when you go to the polls to vote. A Rhode Island driver's license, a Rhode Island ID, a student ID, or any state or federal government issued identification card with a photo on it is sufficient to vote. If you do not possess one of those forms of identification, we will provide one to you for free for voting purposes only. For details, please call us at 222-2340.
Child and Family Elder Care Services promotes health and well-being, a comprehensive program focused on improving the quality of life for elders. Trained case managers provide access to the wide range of services, including independent lifestyle in their own home. Child and Family's licensed home care agency provides trained staff who can assist with housekeeping, meal preparation, bathing, companionship, and other important activities. Call this number to learn more about Child and Family's Elder Care Services.
You're watching PEG RI TV, Rhode Island's public access channel.